Hi, this is Marc Zienkiewicz. I am Germination editor, and welcome to week number 2 of the Germination Weekly podcast. A lot has happened, as you know, since our first episode last week. I will be talking today with Elaine Froese of Boissevain Select Seeds in regards to how to preserve your mental health during this difficult time. We'll speak with Brent Derkatch of Cantera Seeds regarding working from home. He has some very creative ideas about that, including having turned his young daughter's toy room into a home office. We'll also speak with Michelle Klieger of Seed World Pro and Stratagerm Consulting regarding international trade issues. So settle in for the next 24 minutes and enjoy. Now, if you're like me, you might be experiencing some stress as a result of this whole COVID-19 pandemic. You might find yourself working from home. You might find yourself dealing with feelings of uncertainty, etc. Elaine Froese of Manitoba is a professional speaker and certified farm transition communication expert. She helps families work through issues surrounding succession, business, and that old family favorite, communication. She's also a farm partner in Froese Family Farms near Boissevain in southwestern Manitoba. Together, the family operates Boissevain Select Seeds. Elaine, I know you're at home right now. You're in self-isolation after recently being on some business travel within Canada. You speak a lot during the course of your travels about the topic of mental health in agriculture. How can people cope right now with their own mental health concerns? People are in self-isolation, they're working from home. This whole COVID-19 pandemic is causing a lot of upheaval, a lot of uncertainty within the agriculture industry. What's your advice for people right now?
My encouragement to farm families and to seed growers and people who are processing and in the seed business who are now isolated at home is to as a Hudson coach, we talked about on Friday in one of our coaching calls, how you choose to be. So it's called the neutral zone is a term by William Bridges where it's the pain of not knowing. And the pain of not knowing with COVID-19 is we don't know how long this is going to last, and we don't know what the outcomes are going to be. And it's a place of high stress and high anxiety. So my first encouragement for mental health is for people to just be present in understanding what decisions they're making daily and how they choose to be and what their thought patterns are like. So one of the things I've been doing is using this time to connect with friends by FaceTime or by phone or email. And my phone with a cup of tea would be my preferred way to do it. There was a study done by Dr. Nikki Girard a long time ago on farm families called What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger. And so if the listeners today can just hold on to these 3 words, they're communication, connection with your community, and celebration. And so thinking about your communication, being at home, working remotely from your home office, which may be new to you, what you can do to communicate with others. So I'm working pretty much full-time now with BDO as a farm family coach consultant with them. And on Friday, they did a virtual gathering where people could, they had a DJ and just had some fun to wind off the week, because a lot of people, that was some of their first week of working at home. And like I said, picking up the phone or texting. My husband is a farmer and a seed grower. He's been texting a lot of his university friends and just checking in on people. The connection with community is important, and also I don't know if you saw Brian Pallister's emotional appeal a couple of nights ago, but he said just because you're geographically distant doesn't mean you have to be emotionally distant. And so I think that's important for us to remember, as well as that communication is important, connection with your community. And yesterday we had a virtual church service. So there was a worship team and all the pastors from our community were online on YouTube, which is something that's never been done before. So I think people are getting creative of ways that they can still communicate. And if any of your listeners like book clubs, I heard of the story this week of a Zoom group where they had their virtual book club meeting on Zoom. And so Zoom.us, if you haven't used it, is a great tool. There's a free version and it's very user friendly. And I would encourage viewers to check that out, to use that for connection as well. And then the last point is celebration, and being thankful, being grateful for what we have. Our food supply is robust, and you may need to send somebody else for groceries. In our local town, what they've done is they have, you can phone ahead and they'll put your groceries together for you, and you can just pick them up outside the door, so you don't have to stay in the store very long. But also just, we had friends just drop by to deliver some special Pascha as a gift of kindness. So there's lots of different practical things, I think, that people can do still with social distancing to make people feel valued. And my husband celebrated his birthday last week, and it was different than it usually would have been, but there was still birthday cake and lots of good celebration. So
What should people know about their mental health, Elaine, in a time like this? They might be stressed, they might be feeling isolated. What are some things that they should keep in mind regarding their own mood and how it might change throughout the day?
there will be an ebb and flow of different experiences of calm and anxiety, and that's normal. And one of my Hudson coach friends said, also pay attention to how you burst out into tears, which is also, again, I think, a normal response, because this is grief. And what farmers and people living and being isolated at home are grieving is their loss of freedom. Some people are grieving the loss of income and revenue, their jobs. They may only have work for the next couple of weeks. As farmers, we, of course, have a whole year ahead of us and are wondering how that's going to go down with how we usually do our business practices. Also encourage people to practice really good active listening. So just checking in and being careful to listen to how other people are doing, and being careful just to give them time to express what's going on for them. And then another thing that is helpful is humor. And so I have a sister-in-law who sends me Friday Lights, and it's a bunch of jokes and funny videos that I get in my inbox on Fridays from her. Another part that was poignant to me in our coaching call on Friday, Mark, was crisis always ends, which is a very hard saying to listen to, but that's from a Holocaust survivor named Andy, who was the person who created Intel in the US. And he said, crisis always ends, and what's important is preparing yourself to come out of the crisis. It's really important, and have a sense of hope. And maybe that's not something that your listeners have really thought about, but what gives you a sense of hope that this too shall pass? And like Dr. Gerard says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So thinking about what you're learning in this time to appreciate. If you see people in your family that are struggling and their mental health is being challenged, that's where the listening and walking alongside is important. You can also reach out to ruralsupport.ca. You can reach out to mental health crisis lines. If you call them, they can refer you to a mental health worker. I'm not sure how many more calls they're getting at this moment, but the healthcare workers are doing their best to stay healthy and to provide support. And I know I have a family member who has a mental health concern, and she's still getting visits from her proctor and getting support. So that's important that they have knowing that there is support in place.
Yeah, that's important to remember, that we're all in this together. We all depend on one another. And that's an important lesson for business owners to keep in mind. How are you coping with all this at Boissevain Select Seeds? What strategies have you guys implemented to deal with all this from a business perspective?
Well, our son Ian put out a message over social media that when truckers come on our yard now, we're asking them to stay in their trucks, and we'll service them and give them their documents to the window. And that's one adjustment that we've made. We're got supplies in place, and so that's all been taken care of. Husband is just driving on the farm now as we speak, back from Brandon with parts for the seed plant that broke down this weekend. So business as usual with certain adaptations. When we deliver grain to our Viterra elevator here, they talk to us through the two-way radios and don't come out to greet you. So just making adjustments, but again, keeping in touch with customers. And I think using social kindness, Mark, is really important. So texting or calling ahead and saying, I'm coming to your business at such and such a time. Will that work for you? And just, being patient to adapt to some of those extra steps that we now need to take to continue to run our businesses, but to also be cognizant of staying healthy and making sure that people are well served, but that we're all safe as well. So, we're pretty optimistic. We're thankful that we can work together as a family, and our employees are still coming to work, and there's lots to be done, but we'll do it as safely as possible and practice good habits.
Brent Derkatch is director of the Pedigreed Seed Business Unit at the Winnipeg-based Cantera Seeds. Brent, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Mark.
Brent, you find yourself working from home, and anybody who follows you on Twitter would have seen a rather interesting post that you put up there the other day. It seems that you have found a very creative way to create a home office for yourself. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, we've got a finished basement in our bungalow in Winnipeg here. So when we built, we made a area that was originally deemed as a kind of a storage area. We finished it, drywalled it, and turned it into a kid's toy room. So the ceiling height is a little lower in here, and it really wasn't, we weren't able to make it into a bedroom or anything like that. It was really dedicated to storage. But for the last 11 years that we've been living in here, it's been dedicated to holding Barbie houses and boxes of Lego, and I've essentially taken over the space now. We had a spare desk that was from, I think, my wife's university days, that had been used in part for kids to do arts and crafts on and maybe build some Lego. And so I've taken that over and moved a lot of the toys that the kids had grown out of, sort of into another room, and repurposed the space to make it into an office for me for the foreseeable future, I guess. It has a lovely pink wall, as I shared on Twitter, because of having two young ladies here at home. So it has become my new office space from about 8 to 5 every day, and including some time in the evenings as I try and navigate through different schedules between family and work.
How old are your two daughters, Brent, and how's the family dealing? How are they coping with all this?
My oldest is 11 years old in grade 6, and my youngest is 8, and she's in grade 3. So I guess through all of this transition as well, too, as I'm sure you're aware, the schools are officially closed today, but because things were picking up steam early last week, my kids both went to school on last Monday, and there was only about a third of the kids in class. So by the end of the school day, my wife and I decided that we were going to pull the girls out of the class for the remainder of the week. So they were at home school basically since last Tuesday, and so it's a challenge to try and balance the various conference calls and the homework that needs to get done at the same time.
Yeah, how are you managing to do that? Are you used to working from home, or have you always been more of an office-based kind of guy?
I've been in the seed industry for 20 years now, and I've never had officially a home-based office. It's only been, working out of my home or a hotel room if I'm on the road traveling, or if I'm under the weather myself and need to work remotely. So definitely different. So yeah, it's taken some getting used to. There's no question about that. But even more so, I think it's been a challenge for the kids to kind of get used to a routine. I think in general, we're all creatures of habit, whether we're used to going to the office every day or going to the gym every day or whatever it might be. All that is disrupted now. So it's just about finding what that new rhythm of routine, as I've been saying, is going to be going forward.
Cantera Seeds, how are you coping from a business perspective with all of this?
We are finding there are some limitations with Skype. That's been our preferred tool as well, and even the simple part of being able to call in to the phone numbers and to access the conference line can be a challenge at times. So as everybody is using all of the remote access tools at the same time, it's putting a lot of pressure on the whole infrastructure of communications. So you got to sometimes get creative on what your meeting start times might be to be able to get everybody logged in. We've also adapted what we had planned to have a 2.5-day internal face-to-face sales meeting this week in Winnipeg, and bringing in all our staff and to work through a lot of our different business discussions. And of course that's not possible, but we are proceeding with a series of Skype meetings over a longer period of time, and not full days, sort of a 2.5-3 hour chunks of time, and doing our presentations remotely, and in hopes that we could still work through the agenda without having to sit in front of our computer for 8 hours a day going through presentations. I think that would be a lot. So I think you just got to get a little more creative, think outside the box, try and find ways to keep people engaged, and use the tools that are available.
And that's definitely good advice for everybody. Thanks so much, Brent, and you take care.
You too. Thanks, Mark. We'll talk to you soon.
Of course, a big topic right now is the seed trade and trade-related issues as a result of COVID-19. Michelle Klieger is a featured consultant with Seed World Pro and founder of Stratagerm Consulting. She's based in Massachusetts. Michelle, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I always enjoy our conversations, and I've actually gotten a lot out of your podcast so far, so I'm honored to be part of it.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for those kind words. I know everybody appreciates hearing from you. You have been on some of our webinars in the past. You've been featured in Germination Magazine and our sister publication, Seed World. Can you give us some insight into what some of the big trade-related challenges are right now with regards to the seed trade in light of COVID-19?
One is, the seed associations and the companies that depend on international trade and are moving seed are very aware of the importance of seed movement. And I think most governments understand that we need seed for food security. So generally, unless it's overlooked, so far, I think that there's a really good handle on the conversation of seed moving. But I think one of the pieces that would be, has been a bigger concern for me is all of the other things that seed companies purchase that they need for their businesses to operate. And part of that is anything that's coming from China. Containers into the port of LA are down 80% between the stopping at Chinese New Year, the reduction of manufacturing. So, whatever it is that you need to run your business that you're purchasing from China, you might not be able to get. And we, in general, have so much less inventory that, going into planting season, you need more stuff to run your business, right? Because this is a busy time, and there's less of it available. And so what other things in your company do you need, and where are you getting it from globally? With global transportation generally slowing down, are you able to get those things? So that was sort of the international trade piece that I was thinking of and how it affects the seed industry more broadly. And the other one that really came to mind was in a good year, right? The turnaround time to get seed into the country or harvest seed and get it cleaned and treated and tested and prepared and bagged and everything that gets done until it gets to that farmer is a short window. And there's not a ton of room for error or delays. And error and delays are just everywhere right now. Whether you have a smaller staff because you have social distancing policies, whether people are sick and you're working with untrained people, so they're slowing down. All of these places are slowing down the system that is very tight turnaround. I was, thinking about it before we called in, and, what if somebody at customs gets coronavirus? How does that slow down shipments coming in? What policies are, seed companies thinking of if they are moving seed to make sure that they're still able to meet that window?
Well, and one of the big issues we had here in Canada was uncertainty with regard to temporary foreign workers. Thankfully, the federal government has clarified that now, and temporary foreign workers will be allowed into the country, providing they undergo a 14-day quarantine when they arrive. One of the big fears there was that a lot of seed companies, especially vegetable seed companies, wouldn't be selling as much seed if the people who grow that seed couldn't get the labor to actually help grow it and harvest it, etc. So there's probably a lot of connections with regards to the seed industry that people might not think of. Something else I was talking about with some colleagues was the fact that there's a lot of stores are running short on flour now because people are buying more flour because they want to make their own bread at home. Meanwhile, bread production is continuing just like normal. There's just as much bread available at the stores, but people are buying their wheat essentially in the form of flour rather than bread.
Yeah, and I think that really leads me to the last thing that I've been thinking a lot about, is, what are there any farmers that have any idea at this point what they should be planting? I mean, generally in the world, most years, there's a certain number of acres of corn, or, an average consumption of cucumbers or whatever. And I, in thinking about this, was joking with my husband that it's totally unknown. And he said, well, you would have said that last year with the trade war, which is true. I would have said it, but this even takes last year to a new level. Looking at the data in the last couple days, the price of gasoline being so low because of the OPEC dispute, and the lack of demand for any kind of oil because nobody's moving, we see a huge decrease in the price of ethanol. And if in the United States, 40% of corn acres go to ethanol. So, is there going to be corn? Is that market going to exist? Like, how does that change? Some of the other interesting ones that I like to think about, because I actually really do like to think about these things, is the difference between food service and purchasing for your home. And one of the examples I was reading about yesterday was those big blocks of Parmesan cheese, the big wheels. They're really expensive, and really they're a food service item. They're something that a premium restaurant is going to purchase, a wheel or portion of that expensive Parmesan cheese. And if we're not eating in restaurants, now you have less demand for that cheese, because people aren't going to be buying nearly as much of it for their house. And so those cheese producers need less dairy. They need so you need fewer cows, you need less consumption of animal feed. And so how does all of this going to shift? At this point, it's impossible to know when restaurants are going to open, when travel is going to open, when people are going to have conferences again. And so I just think our food system right now globally is changing in very unprecedented ways. And I really feel bad or sympathize with the farmers that are having to make this decision on what to plant when they don't know who their consumer's going to be. And then for the seed companies selling to these farmers and producers, are they just doing what they've always done? Are they changing? And then for the seed companies, do you have the inventory to meet what the farmers want? And so the food chain right now is very messy. And I think that it, coming at planting time, people are going to be forced to make decisions in the next few weeks to a month on what they plant without really knowing what the market's going to look like in the fall.
Michelle, I know you've been watching the trade situation very closely. We will be checking back with you very soon. Take care, and thank you for your insights today.
I look forward to talking with you again soon, and I hope this whole situation blows over even faster.
Thank you to our guests this week, and thank you for tuning in on this March 26, 2020 for the Germination Podcast. Please tune in next week. We'll talk with Claudio Fuellner of the Canadian Seed Trade Association and more. For more podcasts, visit germination.ca.